New images from northwestern Myanmar appear to show several more Rohingya settlements have been completely burnt to the ground. Footage received by the Reuters news agency over the weekend showed the aftermath following fires in at least 8 villages where the Muslim minority had reportedly been sheltering from violence. It's impossible to say how the blazes started. Independent monitors are barred from Myanmar, but nearly 300,000 Rohingya refugees have fled Rakhine State to neighbouring Bangladesh since the end of August. The Rohingyas say they were forced to flee after security forces in Myanmar launched a brutal crackdown in response to attacks on police posts by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. On Sunday, the armed group began a month-long unilateral ceasefire in their fight against the Myanmar military in order to allow aid groups to address the worsening humanitarian crisis. The UN said there is a desperate need for food, water and health services for the tens of thousands of Rohingya stuck in Bangladesh.
We've just arrived at this village, and as you can see from these fires, they've only just been lit. In fact, we bumped into the people who almost certainly lit them. Well, we only got to see a few areas of Mongdor. The extent of the destruction was staggering, though, and most of them were Muslim villages. Well, they call this place Lil Tanjore. It's quite close to the coast. This is one of the first places that the Rohingya militants attacked on August the 25th, setting off this spiral of violence that has led to so many Rohingyas fleeing from Rakhine State. And if you look all around me, this area has been completely burnt down, including, if you look just behind me, that was a clinic run by Médecins Sans Frontières. And the government's version of what happened here is that it was the militants themselves who set fire to everything here, destroying facilities that were shared by Muslims and some Buddhists here. Now, we can't confirm that, we can't speak to anyone, the place is completely deserted. As we've driven here, we've seen village after village that's completely deserted, abandoned boats, abandoned livestock, rice fields left. The few villages where there are people, there are only Buddhists who've been left here, have talked of immense fear of their Muslim neighbours. The only Muslims we've spoken to are inside Mongdor town itself. They're also extremely scared. When we asked them who you're most afraid of, they said the government.
Of all the villages that have been burned down, have they all been burnt down by Muslim militants? Is that what we're saying? That all of them, 100%?
Okay, can we get up? Steve, can we get up?
We've just arrived at this village, and as you can see from these fires, they've only just been lit. In fact, we bumped into the people who almost certainly lit them, carrying machetes, not wanting to talk, though one did admit, yes, they'd set these buildings alight with the help of the police, their ethnic Rakhine. This was a Muslim village. Now, the government has claimed that all of the village destruction is at the hands of Muslim militants and Rohingya inhabitants. What we've seen here tells us a very different story, a story of ethnic cleansing, of driving Muslims out of this part of Myanmar.
desperate last dash to sanctuary. Entire families leaving torched homes and death behind. The Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar, a stateless ethnic minority, often called the most persecuted people on earth.
They are beating us, shooting at us, and hacking our people to death. Many women were raped and killed.
400 people have been killed, says state media, and the UN has declared nearly 125,000 Rohingya have fled across this border into neighbouring Bangladesh in just 10 days, after Myanmar soldiers and Rohingya militants escalated what's fast becoming war.
We were tortured by the military and their accomplices. We had to flee to save our lives.
Last Friday, the military killed 5 people in our area. One of them was my son. They were tortured to death. Our houses were set on fire. We lost everything there.
We can't verify their stories ourselves, and the office of Myanmar's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, didn't reply to request for comment. It's a journey only slightly less perilous than the hell they leave behind. Many in Myanmar simply don't want them there, so their homes are burned, fleeing gunfire with their lives and families on their backs.
We had to walk a long way. We had to cross hills, marshes and paddy fields to make the journey to the Bangladesh border.
But sometimes it's the crossing that kills them. 12 children and 8 women drowning when their boat was capsized. But even then, they don't find solace. Bangladesh has forced 1,000 to go back to Myanmar in just the last week. And a staggering 20,000 are caught in limbo, in a no-man's land on the border, without food or water. Myanmar has for years been unfriendly to the Rohingya, but the explosion of violence comes from Myanmar soldiers doing what they say are clearance operations against, quote, extremist terrorists, who they blame for attacking other ethnicities. In turn, the Rohingya have admitted using their militants to attack police, killing 12 a week ago, but in the defence of Rohingya rights. Mothers forced to flee, but also to leave their sons behind to fight.
I've sent my son to fight. I'm leaving him at the hand of the Almighty Allah. We are ready to face any situation.
An unwelcoming void ahead of them, ashes and agony behind. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN.
This is the end of a 5-day journey which started in a village in Myanmar's western Rakhine state.
We just arrived. We are here for safety. We will beg for food and for help. If anyone can help us, we can feed our children. If they don't, at least we are safe for now.
Her 3 children, hungry, hurt and tired. She says they ran as fast as they could with other villagers while their homes were being bombed. Her husband didn't make it. As you speak to the rows of refugees who have settled along the roadside, you will find a familiar story of people fleeing violence.
There were 2,000 people in our village. All of us have escaped. Some are in Bangladesh, and there are others that are on the way.
Here she is another widow and another mother who lost a child. She says her husband and son were killed when security forces attacked her village.
The mobs and military were stabbing people with knives. They're burning down houses. We had to escape. We walked for 4 days through dangerous places. The security forces shot my mother and brother.
People here tell us that nearly 10,000 Rohingya arrive every day. There is no more room in the official UN refugee camps. 2 weeks ago, they set up outside the camp. Now the rows of makeshift tents and shelters stretch for 2 kilometers down the road. Aid agencies say provisions are in short supply. The tens of thousands of Rohingya and their families who have come here in the past few weeks will have to fend for themselves.
The first thing people will tell you is that they are hungry, but there is no food for them. Many of them have arrived in the past few days with absolutely nothing. But you also get a sense that they are relieved to be here, and they say that they are ready to stay here for the foreseeable future as they have nowhere to return to.
They say this is the end of their miserable, harrowing journey to save their lives. But this is just the beginning of another fight for survival. Devi Gopalan, Al-Jazeera, Kutupalong, Bangladesh.